are back. Ladies and gentlemen, for the last 7 years, my next guest has been NBC's chief White House correspondent. He's also a frequent guest host on the Today Show. Please welcome David Gregory. So much to talk about.
Yes.
And you're privy to so much knowledge behind the scenes in Washington. But before we do any of that, I have to ask you, I'm not doing my job if I don't bring this up. A couple days ago, there's an event in Washington that happens every year.
Right.
This footage emerged of Karl Rove up on stage dancing to rap music.
Yeah.
I don't
think anybody's seen this.
Yeah, and you're standing behind Karl Rove, and you're dancing to the rap music. What the hell happened? Was this planned?
It was not planned, and I want everybody to know that this was done under duress.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot, you know, I'm not saying I wouldn't dance on national television. We know I've done that.
Yeah.
But in this case, this was not, you know, my first priority.
Paint the picture for us. Well, the event is the...
This is the Correspondents' Dinner. We have two
Yes.
Correspondents' Dinners down in Washington, and this was an improv group. Those guys who were on Whose Line Is It Anyway on another network, and they were doing a bit with Rove as a rapper, and they're interviewing him, and it was very uncomfortable, and everybody's kind of twitching in the room, and I thought, well, God, I'm getting red for him. I'm so embarrassed, but at least I don't have anything to do with it. And next thing I know, I'm sitting right next to the stage. They come over and they pull me and my friend Ken Strickland, who's a producer at NBC News. They pull us up onto the stage, and I thought, this is not going to go well.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I thought they might have me, you know, rapping with him or something. I just thought there's no way to really pull this off well.
Right, but you were a good sport. You jumped in. It did seem to go pretty well. It's disturbing footage, and I think we should see it if you haven't seen it. Let's take a quick look.
What's your name? I'm MC Rove. That's right. He can't be beat because he's so white from his head to his feet. But he will rap it when you give him a chance. Look at him move, doing a rapping dance. That's true. He's a dancing.
I give him credit. I give Rove credit for going with it.
I should just point out, in case people are wondering, that like Diddy, you know, first thing in the morning, I put on some Marvin Gaye, and I dance around. So that was kind of.
I think that was quite clear. Yes,
yeah. No, but
you're a disciple of Diddy. Yeah.
Ken and I, who were in the background there, were horrified initially. Oh, we're dancing because this is not exactly a friendly crowd. You know, you've got all the newsmakers and journalists, and you know they're really pulling for you. And I just thought, you know, as Rove continues to behave this way, nobody is paying attention to us, except the president, of course, who was back there like, yeah, Gregory, do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, let me ask you something, because the president obviously was paying attention, because not long afterwards, it was a press conference.
Yeah.
You're there as a reporter to ask some questions, and President Bush starts ribbing you about your dancing. Is that right?
He does. He did.
In front of everybody.
Yes, which he's done before. But yeah, this was a pretty serious news conference, and I was actually, you know, about to ask him about Iraq and veto threats and the deadline for troop withdrawal, all pretty serious stuff. But he's looking at me and he's pausing, and I can see the wheel starting to turn because he likes to rib me, and he just says, "Dancing man." And I just tried to shut him down. I just, you know, for people who didn't see it, you know, he put on quite a performance. Everybody's seen it, Mr. President. Let's move on.
Right, right. He probably enjoyed that. It probably made it hard then to ask your serious question at that point.
Well, but again, I'm used to him trying to throw me off a little bit or throw other people off, so I just kept straight ahead.
You have had the experience of hanging out with President Bush in informal settings as well. You get to sort of hang a little with him, sometimes off the record. Is that right? When was the last time you did that?
Well, we did it not long ago, actually, where we got to do it in the residence. You know, his father used to invite reporters who covered him into the residence to have cocktails and things like that, and we've not really had that kind of time with this president, not just because he doesn't drink, but he doesn't really fraternize with us in that same way. But he does have us over a little bit more regularly now. And in this case, I actually, before we got started with some kind of briefing, I said, hey, do you think you could show us around the residence? Because I've never seen the Lincoln bedroom. And he said yes. And he showed us his office, which is fascinating, which has a desk that was used by President McKinley. It was that private office in the residence is where President Lincoln met with his cabinet and actually signed the Emancipation Proclamation. So it's It's deep.
I've heard the Emancipation Proclamation is there, or a copy of it's there.
There's a copy of the Gettysburg Address that's actually in the Lincoln bedroom, which the First Lady is now redoing. So they're both very. And I know you.
It's going to be a picture of dogs playing poker now.
I know, but you have quite an interest in President Lincoln. I noticed in your dressing room there's a picture of him on his deathbed, which I found uplifting.
Oh, I have a drawing in there. It's the last thing I look at before I come do the monologue.
Yeah.
I'm serious. It makes me feel like, it could be worse. It's a true story. And, yeah, perspective.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, how's it going? Boo. I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that the President Bush, and this is quite a while after the event, over a year later, still enjoys, which I find strange, still enjoys making jokes about Vice President Cheney shooting his hunting partner, and that he makes them all the time. Why is he making these jokes? You'd think that they would want to forget about that.
Well, you do, and this was a serious matter to the Vice President. He's talked about it, but, you can't say the Vice President shooting someone without getting a laugh.
Yeah.
And so the President stood up at the Correspondents' Dinner, and he said, a year ago, my approval ratings were down in the 30s. My Supreme Court nominee had withdrawn, and my Vice President had shot someone.
Yeah.
And then he paused. He says, the good old days. And I'll never forget, at the height of this shooting incident involving the Vice President, it was the most shocking question at a press briefing when my colleague Elizabeth Bumiller from the New York Times said, and this is for real, said to Scott McClellan at the time, the press secretary, at what point did the president realize the vice president was the shooter? And I just thought, I don't think I'm going to hear that question again.
You may.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you something. This is your own personal perspective on this. The 2008 presidential race, as hard as this is to believe, is already up and running. It seems like these things start earlier and earlier and earlier. It seems like there's 75 different candidates.
Right.
Nobody knows how this thing is going to shake out. And obviously there's no incumbent, so this could go any which way. Is there a candidate that you feel the press is sort of rooting for secretly because they think that person would be more fun to cover in the White House? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I don't think there's a lot of rooting going on. I mean, there are campaigns that have better relations with the press or are more open to the press than others. And I go back to my own experience. I mean, certainly this president had his own experience in the White House because of his father, and as a result formed opinions about the press corps and came up with a strategy for how to deal with the press, which was to keep the press at arm's length as long as he could. So from that point of view, it wasn't as fun as somebody who's kind of new and fresh to the job, who's going to make new mistakes and put their print on it. Even Hillary Clinton, who I think has her own experience in the White House, and again keeps the press at arm's length because of her her own feelings of bitterness about her time there.
She has spent 8 years in that bubble, so it's not going to be
and had a rough go through scandals and difficulties. So again, I think she had hardened views about the press. So if you whether it's McCain or whether it's Giuliani, although Giuliani I don't think had a great relationship with the press here in New York. Obama and McCain, I think they've tried to cultivate the press a little bit more. So I think anybody who comes in there who doesn't have any experience with the place is going to be sort of wide-eyed and both make mistakes and have a perspective that's going to make it more dynamic to cover. Because as an institution, there's so much that operates on its own within the White House that seeing that freshness is interesting.
Well, it's also just that surreal experience of someone coming from out of nowhere, seemingly, and suddenly being president and in the White House. That's going to generate probably more interest and excitement, maybe.
I think that's right. And somebody who doesn't really have any of that Washington experience. And you saw that with Bill Clinton initially. I mean, some of the big stories right away as he was trying to impress change right away on the White House with the gays in the military policy and other matters really kind of shocked the system in a way that, this president came in, his initial moves kind of telegraphed by his own experience watching his father. So it was a more programmed group.
Well, it's only going to get more interesting, and you'll be back, I hope, to tell us what the hell's going on. NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams, of course, airs weeknights at 6:30 on NBC. And
I should mention, too, that on Meet the Press with Tim Russert this Sunday, we're going to have a big political roundtable that I'll be part of to talk about where we are in this campaign. It'll be interesting.
I know you're very busy, but we really appreciate it when you make a little time for us. Thanks a lot for doing it. David Gregory, everybody, we're right back. Kaiser Chiefs are here. Stick around.